He died when there wasn't very many people in the room, and his wife was just there. The children had gone to bed, and he made that. So I think I'd be quite, my mother drove the whole way to Belfast, and my grandfather took his last breath about 5 minutes after she were. So yeah, you never know. And obviously then we're talking about obviously palliative care, where it's a very comfortable place and tranquil and sense of serenity here, where people are dying. But when somebody takes their last breath in a car crash, it's very different. Yeah. So we're talking about two very different scenarios. And I'm talking about obviously with my family, where they were both in palliative care as well, at home. So I think it's each. Yeah.
But there's a knowledge in some way of a potential territory ahead, as opposed to a shock of an accident where there isn't. And I'm not sure if this territory you'll know about, but I'll ask you. In terms of from what I can gather, because I'm learning and I don't know a lot about the area, but there seems to be some people are more ready to die. They've come to terms with it more than others. And in terms of the hospice and maybe the volunteers, yourself, or just a broader philosophy, how to handle that, how to hold that sense of, I'm imagining there's a desire to try and bring people closer to feeling maybe not at peace with it, but less
acceptance, I guess.
Yeah, maybe acceptance, less fearful, or there's a lot of language that I haven't got there. But I'm seeing it as a thing that moves from one place to another, that there might be different stages of how to chart that, I suppose. Yeah,
and particularly for our volunteers here in St Francis Hospice, that wouldn't be their responsibility. And I suppose what we would say to our volunteers is, we're here in the moment. We're living in the present moment. So if anything that we can do to make our patients more comfortable, get their hair done, our volunteer hairdressers, volunteer complementary therapists, volunteer artists. So we're here in this present moment. If there was any challenging conversations with regard to maybe them asking, do you think I look like I'm dying or anything like that, our volunteers would be trained in how to respond to that. So they would actually put the question back to the patients and ask them, what's making you feel like that today? And it may be down to maybe a conversation that they may have had previously with a nurse or doctor or something like that. So our volunteers would always say that they wouldn't know the answer to anything, but what they can do is they can go and help in getting the answer. So we'd never let somebody be distressed or worried. But a lot of our volunteers, when they're interacting with patients, they're chatting like with you or I are now. They're making sure that if they want a tea or coffee or anything like that, they're supporting them, but they're in the present moment. So I would always say to the volunteers, look at the person and don't look at the illness that they have, because they're here. So let's make their time here for them as important as possible, and greet it. We don't go around, and you probably see us, we don't go around with our heads down low, not making eye contact with people, looking sad. We're very welcoming place, and that's what all the volunteers do as well. So it's really nice. It's very important.
And it's very positive.
Yes.
I feel that just as a visitor, you can feel that positivity and kind of freshness almost. It's kind of brightness.
Yeah. And even with our hairdressers, they would chat to patients. Like patients might ask them, where are you going on holidays, or have you done anything? And they would talk about that and ask them if they've done that before, been away in this place before. And we're not talking about a lot into the future, but we can talk about now. We have visitors coming in today, right, we'll get your hair done very nicely, and make them feel like all of us, like feel how you should feel. That's very important.
Something that you just made me think of. I've been doing a long-term project with an art therapist, and we collaborate, and we did a lot of work about when I work with people, I'm meeting with them. So I say a lot about, if it's appropriate, what I've done, my family, my background, my experience, my beliefs. I'm exchanging as an artist. Whereas John, the art therapist, doesn't. In terms of his profession, he's got very clear boundaries in the sense of it's very much centred on that person and his skills and what he's doing, but not him as a person in terms of his beliefs, background, where he's trained, what he's going to eat for dinner. You know, I'm probably not explaining it brilliantly, but there's a very different role we've realised. And I was kind of wondering, in terms of the volunteers, I was talking to one of the volunteers earlier, and I wasn't talking about this, but I was talking about kind of thresholds and boundaries in a way, in a philosophical way, in the sense of, I've lost my thread now, hold on, come back to me. So broadly, philosophically, in terms of how the volunteers are, I love how you described it. It's so beautiful, the way you described that in terms of being in the moment. Is there a point where they don't go beyond? I understand what you're saying, and I like that sense, and I understand that sense of the volunteers saying, is there something that made you kind of, you know, that you bring it back, and it kind of circles back round? So I suppose a lot of my work's about thresholds. So it's not about code of practice and that kind of stuff. It's more just the way we behave as people. But I'm aware that you've got a whole kind of philosophy that's underpinned, and you're, you know, imparting that. So I suppose I'm curious in a way, in terms of how much. I suppose there's also the motivations of volunteers, in terms of how you look after people both ways.
And that whole self-care element and everything, you know. So volunteers, you know, people volunteer with the hospice. Some of them, the reason why they want to volunteer is to give something back, because hospice was so good to them and their family maybe a number of years ago. I suppose just to note that we do have a policy that a volunteer cannot volunteer with us if they've been bereaved within the past year, and not necessarily in the hospice, but generally. And you know, you might find, you know, when I interview volunteers initially, you might find that, you know, even if somebody was bereaved 5 years ago, it's still not, you know, it's too soon for them, but it's that we need to ensure the welfare and the self-care of our volunteers and not putting anyone into a vulnerable situation. Be very mindful, because this isn't for everyone, you know, it's not, and the nurses would say that, the doctors probably as well. The volunteers, in terms of the boundaries with patients, we always take the boundaries are very much so gone, like, I suppose, trained. The volunteers get very much so trained in the terms of boundaries, and, you know, ensuring that, say for instance, they don't get very, very established relationships with the patients. You know, like, you'd be quite concerned if volunteers were coming in and saying, I'm just coming in on my day off to see so and so. You know, it's once a week that they volunteer, so a lot can change in here in a week.
That's
you know, so the set days, set time of that day that they come in. And that's for their own self-care as well, you know.
I can see that.
Where am I going now? What am I saying?
How they get in that sense of how much do they give of themselves, of themselves, in terms of. So it's interesting that there's, you know, in terms of there's like a weekly rhythm, and a lot can change, and so they're not going to be kind of coming in regularly. And I suppose it's the thing of with the therapist and the artist comparison. John would never give personal details out, you know. And it's like when I'm saying to him, I'm thinking, this isn't quite what I'm trying to get at. It's what I'm asking you, but I suppose it's more how the hospice works with people and how much there's an exchange.
Like it's at the discretion of each volunteer. You know, if a patient turns around and asks them, "Oh, are you married and do you have any children?" You know, they can say yes, they do, or no, they don't, or whatever. You know, because maybe there might be children. But they know that patient has children. So, you know, the boundaries in terms of the volunteers would never only know the patient's first name basis. They wouldn't know anything to do with their illness, anything like that. Because if a patient needs to be moved or anything in the bed or anything, they always ring the nursing staff to come and help. So, we always say that obviously the boundaries are very important. You would never ask, oh, how long have you been here? You know, what illness do you... They would never ask that. What a patient might want to tell them. So it's that kind of and then from the volunteer perspective, if the patient was asking them a lot of questions, you know, the volunteer, they know themselves if they willingly can answer and tell enough much information as they want, or they might not want to either.
So it's very flexible in terms of people with people.